Crouch. Bind. Set.
Joe presents the House of Rugby, together with Guinness.
Hello everybody and welcome to a new edition of House of Rugby, brought to you by Joe, together with our very good friends at Guinness. Can I just start this week's show by saying how much I detest technology, but welcome to the brave new world. It is part of who we all are, and it is part of who we're all going to be for the foreseeable future. First things first, thank you very much to everybody who sent some really nice messages around our last show with Benjamin Kaiser, the absolute legend that was. What a superstar he was, is, and hopefully will be back very soon. And I'm delighted to say that the incredible guests just keep on coming. Not the Hoff, although he's managed to worm his way back into this week's show, but it is the one, the only, Mr. Ed Jackson. I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson, about the delay to this point. How are you, first of all? We're up and running. It's taken a hell of a lot of effort from all parties. Well done to the backroom staff, but how are you? How's life?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. That was a lesson in technology for me as well. So, like, I don't know, one of those hour-long crash courses in Skype. But no, it's good to see everyone's faces. Obviously, fighting off the fighting off the boredom. Talking to Hass for an hour should help in that respect, or maybe me lose the will to live. We'll see.
Yeah, we're all clinging on there at this point. Half your back. Who have you parked in front of the camera?
So, because I've got no crowd to DJ to, my wife has create an ensemble of different animals because she feels that I'm lonely. So we had this dinosaur, but this particular gentleman looks like it's having the time o' life. So I just thought I would park it in just to watch and reflect and enjoy House of Rugby. It's cheering me up because watching you two fumble around with absolute Fisher-Price levels of technological ability is just the most depressing thing. I've been on this call now. Let's just check the Skype. I've been on the call for an hour and we've achieved absolutely nothing apart from realising that Alex spent all his money on drawbridges and moat cleaning and absolutely none on computers. And it turns out
a couple of ducks on the moat as well.
A couple of ducks. It turns out that Ed has not been skimming any money off the top of Restart because I don't know what he's operating on, but it requires water and steam. I'm too efficient. Yeah. I can't deal with it.
Mate, you have to have a word with that cuddly toy, by the way, because there's no way that anyone you DJ to is smiling.
Nah, go on. Come on.
I tell you what, the size of his pupils, though, would suggest that he is having a good time right now. Ed, it is very nice to have you on. There are so many things that we can talk to you about. Bath, Wasps and Newport. But can we start with sort of, I suppose, how life has been over the last, it's been 18 months. So obviously there was a life-changing moment for you, which a lot of people will know about. But for those who don't, can you just take us through, I suppose, that moment when things changed so dramatically for you? And then we can move on to the other bits.
Yeah. So just briefly, obviously I was playing rugby for 10 years. And then in 2017, April, so actually 3 years ago next week, I dived into the wrong end of the swimming pool, basically, and had pretty serious spinal cord injury. I broke, my head hit the bottom and the disc exploded in the bottom of my neck and I dislocated my neck and that left me paralysed from the shoulders down. Obviously, I was very lucky that my dad was in the pool, so I didn't drown. He pulled me to the surface and then rushed to intensive care, had a 7-hour operation, and woke up and was pretty useless from the shoulders down. But over time, sort of 5 or 6 days later, I still didn't have any movement or sensation, and then all of a sudden had a wiggling of the toe, and then bit by bit things came back to me. I was like really, really, really fortunate, given the sort of severity of the injury, that I've managed to make not a full recovery. I'm still limping around. I still have a lot of underlying medical issues that go along with a spinal cord injury, but I'm way further than I ever or anyone sort of ever expected. So I feel very, very lucky to be hobbling around, but on 2 feet.
It was remarkable as we were faffing about trying to get this thing going. You did a little screen share with Zander, who's our guru, backstage, and your screensaver is just you in quite like, is it Table Mountain? I don't know. Where was it? But it just said "Life is good," which is a beautiful, beautiful philosophy for right now.
That's Mira Peak. So that was a mountain I climbed in the Himalayas in October last year. 21,000 foot mountain. We went with a team of 14 to I'm currently fundraising to try and build a spinal unit in Nepal. Obviously, things are on hold a little bit at the moment for obvious reasons, but we've raised 60k out of the 250 we need, and the mountains have become quite a big part of my life. I use them for my rehab and recovery to start with. First one was Snowdon after a year, but it was just to give me something to work towards, because Haskell know this, long-term injuries, I'm used to them with rugby, but you've always got like a game or on the next season to aim for, and there's a process you go through, and then you get to that point. Whereas for me, it was unknown how much recovery I'd make, and I was putting all these hours in every day that I needed to give myself something to focus on and train towards. So climbed Snowdon after the 1 year mark, and then was completely hooked. Just being outside and doing exercise and achieving things again, but like doing them in a group, in that sort of team environment, after having spent a year feeling particularly useless with everyone doing things for me. All of a sudden, I was able to give back and do some stuff for other people. So it slowly got higher and higher, and we're going further afield. Obviously, we're in the Himalayas now. I don't know where it's going to stop, but if we can raise some money along the way, then it's all good.
Good on you. Haskell, what is the relationship between the two of you? Both mine are public school, obviously, but beyond that?
No, I mean, so we obviously met at Wasps in our time there. And, it was one of those things. Ed and I always got on.
Did you know each other from school days, though, at all?
No.
Just
no.
Wasps.
I'm a lot older than Ed. How old are you, Ed?
31.
Yes, I'm 35. I'm 35 tomorrow. So I feel free to send any gifts in. Many of you two, I don't want the House of Rugby guests, people sending me stuff, because I'll probably get a dog turd and a birthday cake or something. I don't want that.
You don't want a birthday cake on your birthday? That'd be weird.
Well, I want a birthday cake on my birthday, not one that's been made from the House of Rugby Facebook group, because it'll probably have razor blades in it and something else. It's weird, because actually Ed and I, we always got on well. Like, I mean, he probably had the same impression. We'll have to ask him later what he thought of me to start with. But Ed was always actually one of the fittest, one of the kind of standout athletes, but loved life, loved a party. Was a real sociable guy, really liked by all the team. Ed obviously went off to Newport, and I can't remember where I was when I got the message, and my first reaction was like, no way. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I just didn't, you moved to Newport, I think, to kick on and get some more game time, because I think, Wasps unfortunately didn't always rotate its squad and give people equal opportunities. And Ed always trained the house down, but wasn't really given a chance. He was sort of chairman of Bin Juice at Wasps. And he went away to Newport, and I just heard about it. I was just like blown away. And then I think that the beauty about things in rugby is, and Ed and I were talking about it kind of offline, is that if you get part of it and you're brought to the forefront, then people are very eager to help. But a lot of people and sportsmen are very narrow focused. So if people don't cross paths again, you kind of not lose interest, but you're focused on other things. And when obviously Ed's kind of campaign and journey and his experience and his kind of success and his mindset and his dogged nature and his adventures, you follow him on Instagram and see his progress, kind of captured everybody's imagination, certainly with mine. So whenever asked upon to try to help or do things, I bonded, and Ed and I just, our friendships developed. But it's one of those things in rugby, like you meet people, you don't always get to socialise. Like, I'm not the most sociable person, really.
Can I just go back to the 2017 bit? I'd love to know, and I know you've spoken about this before, but can you remember the sensation, the feeling, the fear, what those, I suppose, minutes and also days were like? Did you know instantly something had gone very, very wrong?
I can remember everything pretty clearly. I didn't knock myself out, but I knew as soon as my head hit the floor of the pool that was a big collision. We kind of hit our heads for a living for the last 10 years, so what a big bang is. And I was like, well, I haven't felt one like that. But I assumed that because I was still conscious, I'd just sort of stand up and check if there was any blood. I didn't want to bleed in the pool, and it was then when I tried to stand up that I realised something was wrong. So I just realised I couldn't really move. Like, my right leg was resting on the bottom of the pool, but I was below the water looking up, and that sort of confusion is why I couldn't move quickly, turned to panic of like, shit, I hope someone's seen me, because otherwise, I could drown. But fortunately they had pulled me to the surface. And then I think I was just in shock for a while, to be honest. Like, I wasn't really computing what was going on. I knew it was serious because I couldn't move. And my dad is a retired GP, and he knew it was serious. And it was kind of, he's a stoic Yorkshireman. He's never shown us any sympathy for anything. He spent 20 years being a doctor, having to tell people that pander to people who haven't really got anything wrong with them and say it's going to be okay. So as kids, I had to have a life-changing spinal cord injury to get any sort of emotion out of him. But I could see in his eyes that he was worried.
Did you get what you wanted from that?
Not enough. No, not enough. Still didn't cry. But right. I could see in his eyes that he was worried, and rightfully so. Like, I found out. It took me a year to tell me. I remember the ambulance journey, just being a bit sleepy, and sort of the paramedics and being like, "Come on, we're nearly at the hospital." I thought the journey took about 15 minutes, but my dad plucked up the courage to tell me about a year later that it actually took over 2 hours because they had to pull over to resuscitate me 3 times. So that sort of puts a different spin on things, and like how lucky I am to not just be sort of hobbling about, but even here at all. So yeah, I mean, it was confusion for the start, and then there was a lot of fear involved. I'm not going to lie. Like if I said that I knew I'd always get better, that's just not true. Like my results were showing that I was a complete spinal cord injury, and there wasn't going to be any improvement. Or in the early days, I was hoping that I'd be able to use my arms again so that I could use a wheelchair, because I just wanted to be independent, and that was all. That was my only goal at the start, to be able to sort of do all my own care and wash myself and dress myself, because I didn't want to sort of put my family and my wife through that for the rest of their lives. But as things progressed, got a flicker of movement in the toe, and then we didn't know how far down the line I would get, but fortunately it's to the point where I'm now, as I said, got underlying health issues that go along with a spinal cord injury, but I can hobble around. I was in a wheelchair for a year, and I'm actually glad I went through that process, because it just makes you appreciate everything, all the simple things that you took for granted before, like being able to brush your own teeth or just walk down the stairs. Like those things that never used to make you happy, they were just a job, now sort of make me happy day by day. So I think in terms of my mental space, it's added a lot to my life.
Yeah. Haskell, I know you'll have questions as well, so dive in if you want to. But inevitably, there are going to be enormous down periods at this point. How did you keep spirits high? Were there periods, and were there people who made you laugh, and did you find humour at all in the situation?
Yeah, that became really important. And I think that's the good thing about being a rugby player, is the boys are genuinely ruthless. And obviously, I think the situation we're in at the moment, people are very worried about saying something that might be deemed insensitive. But actually, humour gets us through stuff like this. Like we're very British. I think as British people, we're good at that usually. And when I was in hospital, I remember it was probably a couple of days in, and normally you've got people in going, "I'm so sorry," like this is, and I've got tubes in and out my face and in my neck, and it looks quite serious. And then I remember Cy McIntyre, who Haskell know, came in and chucked 3 juggling balls on my chest and said, "Seeing as you're going to be in here for a while, mate, you might as well pick up a new skill." And I couldn't move anything from below my neck, and that was honestly the best I felt for the last sort of 48 hours, because it sort of added a sense of normality all of a sudden in this very weird situation. So I think humour side's really important. I still get the piss ripped out of me all the time by my mates, and I enjoy making light of what might be seen by some as a serious situation, because at the end of the day, it's up to us how we react to these things. Like, stuff happens to everyone. You can't often help what happens to you, but you've always got control over how you react. So by moping around and feeling sorry for myself, I'd just be making what's already happened an even worse thing. So I like to make light of it and take advantage of the fact that I can get cheaper trains and park outside the front of Waitrose. And I mean,
Waitrose, very middle class.
I digress.
Rose Public School, Waitrose.
Yeah, you know how this is going. But I digress. But there's a funny time. I was actually outside Tesco's in Polton this time. I don't know, I must have got lost. But I pulled up into the disabled space, and there's this old couple there just staring at me, because from the waist up, I look completely normal, young, reasonably healthy. And they're stood glaring at me. And I can walk enough, so I don't ever take like the last space or anything like that. But I opened the door, and I knew what they were thinking. They were waiting to sort of give me that disgusted look. So I opened the door, and I just fell out onto the floor on purpose. and then turned around and tried to drag myself up on the door handle. And you've never seen old people move so fast to get out of the way. So you can have a lot of fun with it. I remember when I was in my wheelchair as well. A lot of people use a disabled toilet when they're not disabled, that's fine. You don't have any problem with that. But I'd always enjoy if I knew 90% of the time a disabled toilet's been occupied, there's not a disabled person in it. So I'd sort of wait outside my wheelchair, and then when they come out, I would just look like I was in really, really bursting and just watch them awkwardly shuffle off. One time, I was in M&S. There you go. Order is restored. And I had a bottle of water.
Fortnum and Mason clothes, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I actually poured a load of this bottle of water on the floor underneath the wheelchair. So when the person came out, it looked like I'd wet myself. Oh. So, but you know, it's it is what it is. You know, these things happen to people, to us, and I suppose, you know, I took a lot of pride in, not a lot of pride, I took a lot from people like Matt Hampson and Henry Fraser, for example, early on after the accident, because Matt, for example, I already knew when I woke up, even though it was difficult, I could breathe for myself. So I was already further down the line. And being fortunate enough to know him and see what he's been able to do and the good he's been able to do. And I know it's still really tough to be in a situation, but since his accident, he's added so much to the world, and he's found himself, you know, he's found a place of sort of peace for himself where he can really help others. I just thought, well, I've got no excuse to mope around and whinge, you know, because if those people are doing it, then so am I. So I took a lot of inspiration from other people who've been through it before. And like I said, I was lucky to know of Matt and Henry and their stories because they really helped me.
Did you ever think that you were going to be this resilient in this situation? Because obviously we play a dangerous sport, and you saw Michael Fatilofa. I was there when Matt Hampson broke his neck. I was on the flank on his side when he went down, and you take for granted these things. As I got older, I think, when you're younger, you're a lot more kind of fearless. But as you get older, you're sort of a bit more like, I'm always a bit worried about hurt. I mean, I've gone into fighting, but even then I'm like, I want to try a sport. I don't want to get hurt doing what I'm doing. But did you think you'd be that resilient? Because sometimes I question what would have happened. What would I be like if something like that happened to me? Would I show the bravery and inspiration you guys done, or would I have done? Because there was that player that, do you remember, who broke his neck and went over to Switzerland? Basically, that was that for him.
Yeah.
It's tough. People always say, like, "Oh, I don't know how you did it. I wouldn't be able to do it if I was in that situation." But you'd be amazed what you'd do when your back's against the wall. Like, I would not have put myself in that bracket of being able to sort of stay positive and work through it. And a lot of it came down to my support network. Like, I'm very lucky to have a really good group of family and friends. But as a personality trait, I feel like now I've become more resilient because of what happened. But at the time, I'd been like, no way, I wouldn't be able to cope with that. Even like not being able to, so I can't use my left hand really anymore. Like, if that happened to someone and they're like, right, you can't use your left hand for the rest of your life, you'd be devastated. But because it's such a bigger thing, and the goal is to not just, it's not to get back to normal health or not to get fit for another game. It's to be able to walk again, like to have some independence. Everything gets put into context very quickly and put into perspective. So simple answer is no, I didn't think I'd be able to be resilient, but also I think other people would surprise themselves. Like, a lot of people are sort of don't give themselves enough credit for what they might actually be capable of. So it stops them even trying. I think we're a lot more resilient than we think we are. And when you're put in a certain situation as a human being, you'd be amazed what you can do and what you can get yourself out of.
Sorry, Alex, to interrupt. I just want to ask one more thing. This is a personal thing, so I don't feel like you have to ask it, but I've always wondered it because when I was injured, not to the extent you were, one of the defining factors that I realised I was with a really special partner in Chloe was that she looked after me unreservedly when I was in hospital and struggling with her thing, and she demanded that she slept next to me and paid for her own money to get a bed next to me and would never leave my side. And when you're injured, you can't walk, you can't move, having to empty your wee bottle and help you to the toilet, do all those kind of things. But obviously, there's obviously different extents of injuries. Did you at any point with Lewis kind of say, I don't feel obliged to be here, or was she always, what was the situation? Because it's a big commitment and you weren't married at that time.
Yeah. I mean, no, she's been incredible. Like, I don't know how I would have done it without her. Like, I think our relationship has been tested in many ways because a lot's changed, but at the same time, we're so much stronger now than we ever have been because we sort of went through it together. And I really feel for people who don't have anyone there to support them, whether it be a partner or family or friends, because the sad situation, the sad sort of facts of it, I was on a spinal ward and there was quite a few people in there who wouldn't even have any visitors, and they're going through a life-changing situation, and you take for granted your wife or your family or your friends until you really need them and you've got nothing else. They're the one thing that are consistent and they stay there. And I think that's sort of changed for me now. I put a lot more emphasis in my relationships with my friends, with my family, with my wife, because you realise that they're the only real constant. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, she's been incredible. I don't know how I'd done it without her. It's not been easy at certain parts because so much has changed. But fortunately, she's a massive driving force, because I knew that if I wasn't independent, it would really affect her life as well as mine. But if I could get myself back to a point where she doesn't need to look after me, then that would make a huge difference. So she was a huge motivation for me as well. Actually, when at the start, when I was just thinking about myself and thinking, oh no, what could I have done differently, or what's my life going to be like, I wasn't motivated enough to spend every hour staring at my toes trying to wiggle them. And it wasn't until the doctor said, look, Ed, you're most likely never going to walk again. We're hoping you can get some use back in your arms, that I thought, okay, shit, this isn't just about me. This is about everyone else involved. And I can't let that happen. And all of a sudden, when I changed my motivation and focused on them, it gave me the strength to put those hours in that needed to be done. So, yeah, she's been amazing.
Well done, her. All men need a good woman behind them, and you've certainly got that. I want to come on to your recovery and her role within that, and how you've sort of got yourself going again. But can I just ask you one more question? I suppose about, was it a 7-hour operation? Is that right?
Yeah.
And were you given? I understand you were given some fairly stark words of warning before going into that.
Yeah, I mean, again, Haskell know when you go under anaesthetic, you sort of you read your last rites, if you like, because 1 in a million or whatever will have an allergic reaction and not wake up. So there's that standard process where they go, look, you might not improve after this, you might get better, but you might not wake up as well. And I think it was the first time I sort of looked at the doctor and believed that. You know, it was my 6th operation, I think, so I'd heard those words before, but I could see it was serious. But again, I was in shock at the time. I think my words back to him, apparently, according to him, were, don't worry, just give it your best shot. So obviously I couldn't quite, I still wasn't quite in my right mind. But they then delivered that same news to my family, who were in the waiting room. And obviously there's a breakdown from your mum and your wife. And but luckily my dad was there. You know, he's a doctor. So actually through this process, you know, he's straight away saying, don't worry, they have to say that. He was more helpful to them than to me, really, keeping everyone calm.
I quite wanted him to pat the surgeon and say, don't worry, give it your best shot as well. I saw that rather Yorkshire.
Yeah, he probably showed no emotion at all.
Yeah. And so when you came out, what was the advice? What was the diagnosis off the back of that? I mean, had he given it his best shot and he was pleased, or were you told, you know, we are where we are, kind of thing?
Things with spinal cord injuries, they're all different, and often only time will tell how significant the injury is. At the time after my accident, I was showing as like a complete injury. I had no movement, no sensation from the shoulders down. And when I woke up in intensive care, it was kind of like, first of all, what am I here? Why am I here? Have I sort of dislocated my shoulder again? Is it another rugby injury? And then you slowly dawns on you what's going on, and bit by bit you try and move things and they don't, and then you're like, okay, shit, okay, at least I'm alive, but this obviously hasn't helped or hasn't shown any improvement yet. And then you go through this weird stage of just not knowing how it's going to end up. But after, like I said, after 4 or 5 days, they told me, you do this ASIA test, it's American Spinal Injury Association, and it's loads of pinpricks and movement tests and sensation stuff, and takes about an hour each time, and they do it 24 hours, 48 hours, sort of every 24 hours for the first week. And then they base their prognosis or diagnosis on that after 5 or 6 days. And I was showing that I was complete and unlikely to make any recovery from below the level of my injury. So, but actually my reaction to that news surprised me, I suppose. It was kind of, it might be the competitiveness or, you know, the athlete in me that saw it as a challenge rather than an order, and I had something to try and prove them wrong, I suppose, not in a nasty way. You know, I owe the surgeon my life, really, because there was a good chance of me not making it through that operation. But that competitive instinct kicked off, and I was like, right, let's see if we can turn this round.
It's incredible, Haskell, isn't it? I mean, for all the guests we've had on, it's the sort of Ed story is the one that makes you stop and think the most.
Yeah, just because I think, you take for granted the nature of a contact sport and that you can survive all that time, and then, one error of judgment, one accident, and that can completely change your life. Yet, we see people in our sport who are hurt all the time, and we kind of take our bodies and stuff for granted so often. And then, I think what Ed's been through, such a test of character, of mental fortitude, of learning about yourself, and also in some ways, like he said, suddenly taking a different look on life and appreciating stuff way more. My wife always laughs with me because I always brush my teeth I do actually brush my teeth, contrary to what people say.
Doesn't smell like you do.
No. Well, you just take your dentures out and rinse them under the tap, don't you, Alex? I brush my teeth, right? But I always brush my teeth with both hands. I always do everything with both hands, because when I was playing, I thought to myself, if I got injured, I'd like to, you know what I mean? I've always thought those things about doing, because I'm just aware, because I've seen so much. I was there with Matt Hampson, and that changed my whole approach to life. That whole situation with him changed everything that I thought about. I was 19, or I think it was 19 or 20 at the time. And, I'd always taken things casually. I was like, wow, everything will be fine. We're going to play rugby forever. It's going to be great. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And then to see someone like that, someone like him who was full of life, someone that was I think he'd been fighting a guy called Michael Cusack about 10 minutes earlier, and they'd fought for so long, they'd punched themselves out. I was like, is anyone going to deal with them? And they were like, the coach just went, don't worry, just leave them.
I used to play with Koo as well. He's tough as well. You wouldn't want to scrap with him.
Yeah. No, Daddy Koo, yeah. and they were fighting, and then we go to a scrummaging session, and the scrum collapses, and I know we're going to get Matt on the show, so and this happens, we get away taken from, and we carry on doing line-outs, and there's Tony Spreadbury resuscitating him, and I'm like, should we still be? And like, no, concentrate on line-outs, and it's like your mate, you don't see on a regular basis. Someone getting resuscitated, you don't see that level of injury. You see, if you're really unfortunate, you'll see a dislocation or a leg break or whatever. But it taught me to make sure that I lived every single day as though it might be not the last, but with a mindset that you've got to do your best. You've got to maximize every area of your life. You have to appreciate everything in life. That you have to really expand your body, expand your mind, treat people well, because you just never know when that's gonna finish. And I think Ed's thing for me, it makes me wince. You look at the physical, I know how fragile the human body is, and unfortunately we live in a world now with WhatsApp where everybody sends round horrific injuries. I can't, funny jokes, of course. The injury stuff, absolutely no way. And I just can't handle it because, and that's why I'll never go skiing. I've survived this long. I just don't need to fall down and do something. And with Ed, it's amazing really just to hear it, because you think but you just got no idea.
Look, I think that's a really important point, and obviously we might get onto it a bit. I know Has talked a lot about it recently, but I'm a trustee of Restart as well, so Has just come on board with us. So you see actually the level of not just the injuries, but the other issues going on. And as a professional sportsman, you feel like you're invincible. Has said that they carried on with the session when Matt Hampson's being resuscitated. That's very rugby. We got taught you don't stop. Obviously, if they'd known what was going on, it wouldn't have been the same. But it's you just plow on and you keep going. And in a way, people don't. You're blinkered to how serious it can be. But at the same time, that really helped me getting through my accident, because I was just like, no, you plow. It'd been ingrained in me. You plow on and you make the most of the situation. So it's a bad thing and a good thing, I think, especially in the rugby world. I mean, I feel very fortunate to be part of that, #rugby family, as you say, because I got supported from so many different. It wasn't just my clubs supporting me, it was everyone, and I got some letters from all over the world, which was amazing, from random players who I didn't even know or play against. And knowing you've got that support and that community behind you makes a huge difference. But yeah, injuries are pretty serious. It's one of those things where it's never going to happen to you until it does. You hear about them, but weirdly, I would now say that I am less cautious, which is my mum hates. Obviously, as you can see, I'm like stumbling along the cliff tops in the Himalayas, like as if I walk like I'm drunk at the best time, and I fall over in the garden. So I shouldn't really be on cliffs. But you kind of realise that I played professional rugby for 10 years, and it was diving into the wrong end of the swimming pool that ended up causing this serious accident. So why wrap yourself in cotton wool your whole life? Because you might just get hit by a bus crossing the road tomorrow. It's kind of like you've got to live every day, not like it's your last, as Has said, but go out there and do stuff and experience stuff and properly live it, because you never know when it's going to end.
But also, I think it was really interesting about you, and I never really talked to you about what your plans were outside of rugby. But as I said, you weren't getting the game time at Wasps. You trained a house, you went to Newport, but I don't know what you had planned or what you thought your life was going to be. But I'm almost excited, and it's taken something terrible to make you the person you are, the inspiration, like the relevant, the focus and drive you have. Because I'll be honest with you, if you'd gone to Newport, you played, how many times you played, hopefully you would have kicked on, had a fantastic career, and then you would have retired, and would we have heard any more of Ed Jackson? I don't know, depending on what you were going to do. Now it's amazing that I think you've almost become, something maybe more than you were ever going to become just being a rugby player. And that, I think, is the exciting thing for me. It's like when you first started and you come about, in the rugby community, we're always good. We we get around our own, and then we do a little bit of work for somebody, and then, we don't forget, but we move on quite quickly. That's how the world works. But I think what you've done is actually, like with Restart, with all the inspirational kind of fundraising stuff, it's maybe more than you would have ever done before. I don't want to talk out of turn, but it just seems like that to me.
Yeah, I can completely agree, mate. I was going down the standard route. I was doing a master's in commercial property finance, and I was going to go probably play a couple more years. I just signed 2 more years at Dragons, maybe go and try and nick a year in the lower leagues in France just to learn French, have a life experience, and then go up to London and play maybe Nat 1, Nat 2, and get a foothold in the city and get helped out with a job. And you know what? I probably would have been completely happy with that and had a nice life. But my eyes have been opened up because of this I feel like I had a duty at the start when I started the blog, and people were being positively impacted by my story. I felt like I had a duty to carry on helping, not just people with spinal cord injuries, but just keep living normally and keep telling my story, I suppose, and then getting in contact with people who are going through something similar. And then all of a sudden I felt real value for the first time in my life. Like, professional rugby is amazing. Professional sport is amazing. I've loved every second of it, mostly because of the people I've got to meet. But it is quite a selfish pursuit. Like, you're playing in a team, so yeah, you're doing the best for your team, but you want the team to win so you can do better. If someone comes along and offers you more money, you go and move club. And it's also it's the entertainment industry, so you're replaceable. Like, there's always going to be someone else who's going to come along and entertain in your position. And then all of a sudden I felt like I was in a position where someone else couldn't just come along and have these conversations I was having with people who had just picked up the phone and said, I don't know what to do. I want to kill myself. I've just broken my neck and I can't move. And then 20 minutes later, them saying, thank you so much. That's really helped. I'm really going to give this a go. Other people did that to me, and then now I was in a position that I could do that to other people if it felt not just I had a right or duty to do it, but it felt amazing. So my whole focus moved off me and onto others, and that's why I started the charity, and that's why I spend a lot of time speaking to people going through something similar, and I've got real value in my life. I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't translate into financial value yet, but it's way more than that. Like, I wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't know that about myself, or I wouldn't have developed that without this supposedly terrible accident. So I'm more excited for life now than I ever have been, even though that was a supposedly terrible day when I dived in the wrong end of the pool. Maybe it's not.
That's amazing. That is true testament to how to overcome adversity. Ed, I want to pause very quickly. I actually wanted to talk to you about your rehab and your road to where you are now, but I'd actually also love to get into the Restart with you and your role there, particularly with Has joining as well. It seems more relevant than ever, given what's going on at the moment. But let me just quickly pause, because I do want to just sort of do the midpoint trail. Obviously, you're watching and listening House of Rugby on Joe, together with our very good friends at Guinness. My name is Alex Payne. We've got Haskell alongside, and the wonderful Ed Jackson. Still to come, we're going to talk about the recovery, obviously. We'll find out how Ed went all Uma Thurman. We'll climb some mountains, both mental and physical, and we'll talk about the game as it is right now and what Restart and the RPA are able to do to help the players in what is an incredibly difficult time. But let's quickly whip back to last Thursday, just in case you missed it. We had one of the great House of Rugby guests, the wonderful Benjamin Kayser, waxing lyrical on the return of French rugby. Have a listen to this.
Listen, this is absolutely ginormous for us. Extremely happy, extremely proud. But because we're French, people were starting to moan after the Scotland game. Okay, Let's just press pause and realize how shit we've been for the last 10 years. We've been dreadfully disappointing, Six Nations after Six Nations, campaign after campaign, either because of the results or either because of the actual production of game. For once, listen, there's a fantastic new setup that's finally building through not just one good coach, but like a generation of coaches, like a whole pyramid of quality within the coaching staff. Then there's French rugby deciding to base themselves on the under-20s that are double world champions. We've got the World Cup in 2023. For once, I can feel that the Federation and the League are finally working together. I can give you a million different examples that will make your jaw drop about the lack of link and play together and direction of French rugby for years and years.
You're watching the House of Rugby on Joe, together with Guinness.
That was the wonderful Benjamin Kayser. I highly recommend you dip back into that and have a little listen and a watch if you haven't already on last week's House of Rugby. And a reminder, of course, you can watch all of our content via our YouTube channel and via the podcast app, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Hours and hours of fun for you, which frankly we all need right now. Don't forget our Facebook group as well. More than 35,000 of you in there at the moment, which is extraordinary. And check out our Instagram, which is @RugbyJoe. And there you can get photos, news, and behind-the-scenes bits and pieces, as Haskell would say. So, Ed, amazing story and incredibly inspiring. Putting so much in perspective at this point. We were going to talk a lot about your rehab, but I do want to come on to some of the more current issues as well, which I know you're heavily involved in. But just in terms of, I suppose, your journey from what we've discussed to where you are now, what is the story around Uma Thurman and the toe wiggling?
Uma Thurman, yeah, I know, it's weird, isn't it? I remember it. I was wondering what you were talking about then about Uma Thurman, but I now realise you're talking about Kill Bill, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to wiggle my toes. It was weird because you're looking at body parts, telling them to move, and nothing's happening. And that's the first time it's ever really happened in your life. So it's a bizarre sensation. But then after 5-6 days of trying, all of a sudden there was a flicker in my toe, and I thought maybe it's a spasm because I was having spasms. But then I did it again and again. I couldn't feel it moving, but I could see it moving. So I was just like, "Mum, get in here! My toe's wiggling." And then it was just, you laugh about how your perspective changes, but all of a sudden there was a wiggling toe, reducing a room of adults to tears. So bizarre moment, but probably one I'll never forget, and the start of a long journey, because that meant that I was told that I was hopefully getting movement back in my arms, but not in my legs. So that just showed that all bets were off then, because there was a bit of hope that everything that I'd been told might not be the case, and there was that hope there, and then that carrot that went after, and it all started with a wiggling toe. And I've actually got a video of it. It's minging. My toes are horrible, but yeah, cool moment.
I'm not entirely sure I want to see that, but yeah, go on.
with the wiggling toe stuff. You said earlier that were you not asked about it? You just sort of thought, you took what they were saying as writ and weren't going to do anything about it? Because you said that then it took the doctor for you to tell you that you can't do it, that you then started doing it, or did you have to be like, come on, Ed, you're not doing your exercise, you're not doing what you should do?
No, I was doing what I could, but obviously you know what it's like. You can always put more effort in. I think I've completely redefined what effort is. I know you put a lot into everything you do. But I thought, in pre-season, you're running RFU fitness tests and stuff like that. You think you're hitting 100%, but when your independence is on the line, you realise actually you've only ever been operating at like 40-50%, and you can really, rugby players talk about going to the well. You can really go and find that extra bit. So that's what I kicked on and did. At the time, I was already doing what I should be doing, but and at that point, I'd be lying if we thought I would get better. But no one was saying anything. I think that was the thing. Everyone was too scared to sort of talk about the maybes and the ifs and buts. So it was when the doctor actually said it and verbalized it, all became real. And I think we'd been fearing it up until that point. Then all of a sudden it was there, and that was the sort of extra kick. Turned out to be the extra kick I needed.
Do you remember the sort of the progress? And I suppose, for someone who was incredibly fit and had done pre-season and playing top flight sport, do you remember the effort, the physical and mental toll on getting yourself from toe wiggling to first steps to mobility to independence again? That has to have been the hardest thing you've ever done, I presume.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's different because being neurologically tired, it's not the same as like being absolutely blowing on a rowing machine or something, but it's a different type of tiredness. You could just be wiggling one finger for an hour and then you pass out for 2 hours of sleep because you've just been putting so much mental and physical energy in, even if you're not moving. And they call it neurological fatigue. So it's a different type of sensation or a different type of tiredness, but I soon discovered that the whole process was basically going to be keeping myself positive and my mind healthy, and then the body would follow. So it wasn't just putting the effort in because I couldn't even move that much, but it was about being positive and being in a place where I could get the most out of what I was doing. So actually the management of that was about me trying to create processes to keep myself in a good mindset so I could get the most out of my body. And over time, I just developed these different ways of doing that and keeping my head up and keeping moving forward. And it's quite funny because I've spoken about these before to people and I didn't do any research at the time. It was just ways that I was working out because I had to, basically. And it turns out most of them are like proven techniques, in psychology or philosophy, but I sort of worked them out the hard way. But yeah, it was a weird process, and I'm not a spiritual person. I wasn't a spiritual person, but in terms of, I 100% know now that the mind leads the body. When I was in a good place and moving forward, my body was recovering. And then you'd have those days where you'd see no changes for 2 or 3 days, even though you're putting everything into it. And you start thinking, fuck, is this it? Is this where I'm going to end up? I wanted to get further than this. And your body would react as well. And you'd have to find a way to snap yourself out of that and keep moving forward.
Unbelievable. Haskell often talks about how Chloe needs time out and he drives her to the edge. I just wonder, you mentioned your wonderful wife, Lewis. I just wonder, how did she escape from, not you necessarily, but the scenario?
I don't know. She was just really stoic about it all, I think, and she became my physio. Because within the NHS, obviously, there's amazing people, but they're restricted by resources. So I was one of those annoying patients looking at what they're doing in Japan and in America, and I'm like, I need to be in 8 or 9 hours a day. That was at the time the general consensus was in this country that you go on bed rest for like 12 weeks, so you just lie flat and don't move to give your injury a chance to recover. But actually, it moved on in like Japan and America, where it's all about early input. If you lie down and do nothing, then the opportunity will pass you by and you'll get less recovery further down the line. But then they obviously didn't have the resources to do that for me. So then I ended up moving to the RUH in Bath after 2 weeks after I got out of intensive care. And there was a physio there called Pete. I remember my dad asking him straight down the line, this is the annoying thing about for physios and doctors when you come in and one of the family members is a doctor because you can't pull the wool over anyone's eyes. And the consensus was right that this 4 hours a week of physio is actually all you need to get the best out of your recovery, whereas we knew that wasn't true. That was just all they could provide. So to be fair to Pete, when my dad asked him straight, would more input make a difference to Ed's recovery, he couldn't lie. He was just like, yeah, it would. So we then had to bend a few rules. Pete would actually teach my friends, and in particular Lois, how to do a lot of the physio for me. And in the early days, it's just like keeping things mobile, putting sensory input. So actually I was ending up having the equivalent of 6 or 7 hours of physio a day, because obviously he can't commit more time to me because that'd be taking away time from other people on the ward. So my friends and my family became as important to my recovery as the physios did. And I owe Pete a lot for taking that leap of faith, because it's quite against the rules in terms of insurance and all of those things. You're not allowed to bring in even private professional help to the NHS because of insurance. So I then went on a bit of not a mission, but I was writing through the blog about what we had done, and actually got to the point where the hospitals were asking me to come in and talk with Pete about what we had done, because the physios and the doctors don't want those constraints either. And they need patients' perspective to hopefully get some rules changed. I'm pleased to say now they've taken that 12 weeks bed rest rule away. So they are giving earlier intervention. Obviously, there's still the same resourcing issues, but hopefully that can benefit other people, because I was lucky enough to be in a situation where I had friends and family there the whole time. My dad was a doctor. I was an ex-sports person, so I was willing to put the hours in. So it was like a perfect storm, I think, of Pete said, if you chuck a bag of coins up in the air with someone with this injury, all of mine ended up heads, luckily. Like, I just got really lucky with my situation and how things transpired to where I got to today. But yeah, Lois has been a huge part of that. And a lot of my friends as well and family were coming in and just putting the hours in. And I've got no doubt it made a massive difference.
Ask. What are you thinking listening to all this?
I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I wasn't there because I charged him too much. That's what I mean. It was awkward. He said, Hask, can you rub my back? And I said, yeah, for $5,000. But it was a bit awkward. No, but I actually did take on a bit of a physio role for Ed when we had that day out at Soho Farmhouse. Walking can sometimes become a little bit of an issue, and there's sort of a tipping point where you have to keep finely balanced. We don't want to go into too many details because Si will whip it out with his vicious scythe. But essentially, let's put it this way. There was a slight point where and I'm not known for the safest pair of hands in the world, but there was a couple of times where Ed, just a slight divot in the path, a sun lounger, occasionally I had to catch and leap him. So technically I did save him a few times. So that was quite good. I put that on my tax return. So hopefully I get some sort of care in the community award back, some rebate. It was a couple of times I've never been that terrified. You know when you're aware of something? I was watching Ed, and the whole time out of the corner of my eye, I was watching him walk towards me, and something would happen, he'd get a little bit unbalanced. I'm like, what? But obviously you don't want to be because he's great about it and he's got a great sense of humour. We just laugh it off. But there was a lot of time when I was like, "Are you again?" I get him and standing back up again, and be like, "Fine." I'm like, "Come on, mate!" And I put my arm around him, just hold him up. I was like, "If I don't let go of him, he'll be fine." It was like giving me nervous problems because, like you said, when he fell out the car to wind those old people up. Obviously, when you see someone fall over, Ed he probably falls over all the time, so it doesn't bother him. But for me, I was like, "Oh God!" Everyone gets really precious, so I was panicked that he was going to hurt himself.
Amazing.
Yeah, lucky you there, because I've crushed a few of my mates as well. Just because I'm still not small, I'm not the smallest, I'm not as big as I used to be, but you could actually grab me.
Falling timber, yeah. From obviously a lot of the help that you've received and you've touched on the blog already, and you've touched on some of the fundraising you've been doing, but just talk us through your role with Restart now. And I suppose I was actually just before we started recording this was a statement released by the RPA, which hasn't gone through in detail, but I presume it's to do with all the players and the scenario they're in. But talk us through how Restart and you came together, and how on earth Haskell's now got involved in the RPA as well.
Restart reached out really early on, like after the first week. I think there's a cooling off period, I think, where people will keep their distance to give your family some space, because you don't know how serious it is, for example, or how things are going to transpire. But then they got straight in touch, and they didn't know how they were going to help at that point. I'm in the NHS, you can't bring any outside help in anyway, but they just said, look, don't worry about anything to do with your life external. Because at the time, you're thinking, is my wife going to have to leave her job, which she did, because to come and be with me in hospital? Am I going to have to move house? How am I going to pay the mortgage? They just alleviated all that stress, because they didn't actually do anything, but they just said, look, we're here. We won't let any of those things become an issue. So then I could focus 100% on my recovery. So that made a massive difference, them reaching out early on. But then since I've left hospital, obviously they've supported me in giving me having some great rehab. And I just have to say that, I was standing after 3.5 months, and that was 100% done by the NHS. Obviously my family and friends really helped, but they were amazing. The people I met, I still work with a lot of them. And I didn't have any outside support, because I think people just assume that maybe because I was a professional rugby player, I'd have all this extra help. But actually it was all the NHS massive I mean, I can't owe them. I can't tell you how much I owe the NHS. It's this amazing thing we have, and obviously it's under a lot of stress at the moment, and it's broken in so many ways, but it's not to do with the individuals involved, and they definitely saved my life in the first instance, and then got me back on my feet. So I just wanted to say that. But since then, Restart have funded a lot of my rehab, or they did for the period after I left hospital, and that made a massive difference because I had access to some of the top physios. I was going back and using a lot of my rugby physios as well, like Kerry Parham I still work with. Haskell, know him. But he was at Bath at the time, and he's better he's good just for morale. Like most of the time we just have a cup of tea and a chat, but he's a hilarious little Welsh bloke. But so they've been there to support in that way, and then to the point where I got so involved with them, I suppose, and got to know the individuals at the RPA and Restart, and there's some great people there, and I think sometimes they go through stages of getting a bad rap, but then all of a sudden I was seeing the difference they were making, but it was all behind closed doors. No one was talking about it, and especially on the Restart front. And I told Hask when I rang him to explain what's involved with being a trustee. I said, mate, it's honestly the most privileged position I've got, because you don't understand like the impact they have on players' lives. You'll see all the cases coming out of the Premiership, and you're actually in a position where you can do something about it. And a lot of these people we know personally. So it was eye-opening to say the least. But fortunately, Hask listened to me for the first time ever, and he came on board, and he's already adding a huge amount. I think you can say a lot of things about him, but he genuinely does care about other people, and especially people within his team. And when you're in Restart, your team is everyone who's it's all the rugby players, in the Premiership and in the sevens teams. And I know how much he will care about them, and he'll also fight their corner. And I think up until this point, we've been doing amazing work as Restart, but we haven't been out there pushing things forward, making things public. And obviously the amount Hass likes to talk, and how big his mouth is, but also the reach he's got is going to make a big difference. But it's not just about that. Like I said, he genuinely does care, and I think I'm excited about. I know that trustees meetings are going to be a little bit more interesting now. He was sending me some wild messages on the chat box on the side of our last trustees meeting, but no, I think he'll be a great addition.
What have you done, Hoff, so far? What's been on your to-do list? What have you been asked to do, and what are you doing?
It was a really interesting thing, because obviously, I'm very, very, very lucky to be in a privileged position that people contact me and ask me involved in charities all the time. And I learned very early on that it's very easy to say yes to lots and lots of things, but not really do a job. And I don't really feel like, me posting or reposting something on Instagram or something else, or giving a shout out to someone. Yes, it might have some short-term value, but you can do that at the end of days and not really have an impact. So, I work with Sebastian's Action Trust, who do some amazing work for families with terminally ill children and disabled children, to help them get a respite and have a holiday, and create these amazing houses that people can go away with. And I've done stuff with Bernardo's, again with kids, because I was always lucky to fulfill my dream as a child. I had a very privileged background, and I was able to do that. And I want kids to be able to experience that and have that. And then when Restart contacted me, I got a phone call from the RPA, and I said, look, the first thing I said, look, guys, I want to make sure I can actually give this some time. I don't want to just say yes. I don't want to become a trustee and not do anything. There's no point. And I know, being completely brutally honest, they knew that I was, gobby, obviously, and that, I was interested because of all the work I'd done with the RPA, but more, using my platform and profile to try to push things forward. So I weighed it up, and I had a chat with Ed, and Ed told me about it, and was, as I said, we get on very well, and he was very candid about it and said, look, you're going to have an opportunity to help people. You're going to be shocked by the number of people we are helping. Ben Kay, who stepped down for me to step up, has done a brilliant job. Ugo's done a brilliant job. And I got into the first meeting, and I sat there, and obviously, like me, I didn't want to say anything too early because I wanted to get the lay of the land. But I was listening, and everyone was making good points. And Ugo was very passionate and spoke really well. Ed spoke really well, and there was a real interaction. There was a few things that I just picked up on straight away that I was shocked that there is absolutely no funding for from the clubs, and absolutely no funding from the RFU to help with Restart for players, right? And obviously, you've seen the amount of work that all charities are doing around the place, like mine and everything else, on mental health. And mental health is kind of the biggest funding thing that's going to happen in the future. They said, obesity and stuff is putting pressure on the NHS and all this kind of stuff. Mental health is not going away anytime soon, and especially in a male-orientated sport where a lot of us don't open up. I was shocked to see that so many players were reaching out for this, for injuries, for help with starting new careers. The fact that we finally got rid of that old stupid mentality in rugby where you just got to keep your head down, don't focus on the future, just work really hard, be humble, and everything will take care of itself. Restart encouraging players to develop careers outside of sport, give them a restart and help them move forward is essential. I remember when I started doing that, everyone was like, "Oh, just shut up and focus on rugby." And I was like, well, what happens if you have a Matt Hampson? What happens if you had Ed Jackson? What happens? You don't want to get to the last bit of your career, suddenly panic, realize you've got 3 months left, go through your Rolodex and suddenly start selling antivirus software. Because I'm sure when you were a kid, you didn't wake up one morning and go, "I can't wait to sell that." It doesn't work like that. So I listened to all of that, and I was just shocked by the fact it was hand to mouth, essentially. That the cycle, the amount of people that were putting calls into the anonymous hotline demanding work was far sort of outreaching the amount of money that was available to the pot. And the fact that the clubs and stuff were kind of at this point started rubbing their hands at the fact the RFU were like, well, and it's mirrored by the fact that's happening with the pay cut situation at the moment. I was just blown away. So we talked about it on the show a couple of episodes back, and I suddenly sat there, and Chloe was listening to me, and she was like, "I haven't seen you that passionate about something for so long." And I knew it was a good cause, but it's really, really captured my imagination, and so much so with the players situation, for all the kind of piss taking that I take and obviously give out on myself. I've had players reach out from different clubs talking about this pay cut situation, talking about everything. And I kind of get quite fired up by this process. So I'm very passionate at getting restart. I want to help. I want to raise awareness, because the one thing Ed talked about, Ugo talked about, was the fact that players are predominantly very selfish and don't really pay attention. If you ask a rugby player, will you wear a restart t-shirt? Yes. Will you go and raise money for Ed Jackson? Yes, I will. Will you go and do this thing for this cause? Yes, they will. But do they take an actual real interest in what's going on? The answer is not really, because it doesn't profoundly affect them until it affects them. And people are oblivious. And I was just shocked, because I had done the same thing. Wear a restart t-shirt on restart day, collect some money for that, promote this, retweet that, do a video, whatever you want. But I'd never really paid attention to what the hell I was helping out for. And the first thing is educating these players, because England players do a lot of work for charity. For example, do a load of dinners. They're hoard out like you wouldn't believe throughout the whole, Six Nations, Autumn International throughout the season. Not one of those dinners' funds goes back into the pot for their own players to help with mental health issues. So there are players that have been close to, the ultimate limit, taking their, going to extreme, and have had to reach out, and Restart have helped them get back from the brink, literally and figuratively, to help them. And, no funds are going back into it. And that for me was like, it's not acceptable. Just as it's not acceptable for the clubs at this point in time to turn around and say, we're taking your money, we are putting you on furlough. No. Have a discussion. All the players will do the right thing, but there's ways and means of doing business. And I'm real fired up about it. So I might don my beret and start, going real. We might have the militant wing of the Restart, because I've got nothing to do. I'm unemployed, so I'm taking names. I'm start picketing. We'll get Ed. We'll get Ed. I mean, yeah, Ed won't be storming any buildings, but he could be out there, controlling from the nerve centre.
I'll drive so we can park right outside.
Yes, straight outside the front of the Marriott into the RFU, boom, straight through the door. Oh, I tell you who will be in. Dozza will be in. He'll be part of Restart. Get Dozza a balaclava. He'll be straight through the front doors.
God help us all. Ed, I don't know if this sort of comes across your radar or not, but can you give us a sort of snapshot as to what the current climate is, between players and Restart and RPA, etc. I mean, it's not just rugby, obviously, but it's a sport we all care deeply about, and there are a lot of very, very worrying signs. USA Rugby's filed for bankruptcy this week. ARU has laid off furloughed all of its staff. You've got Premier League football clubs beginning to start doing exactly the same as well. So if there are problems at that level of the sport with all the money it's got, where is rugby at the moment in the crisis that we're all experiencing?
So, as Has touched on, our biggest support is given through mental health. 50 cases a year on average of confidential counselling taken just out of the Premiership. So you can see there's a definite need for it, but we're expecting that to spike now because of this sort of period of uncertainty that everyone's gone into. And I've always thought like one of the problems with, not problems with sport, but one of the dangers is it's all encompassing. Like it's one of those only professions where if you're really good at it, probably from the age of 14 or 15, everyone's saying, right, this is what you're going to do. It's chosen for you. You don't get to uni and you go, right, which way am I going to go? And you're in, and it's all encompassing, and you get to like 25 or 30 and it's all you've done. Now, some clubs are getting better and people are getting better at sort of doing stuff outside of the sport. But in general, most players will be coming into this period now and they don't know what the hell they're going to do if they don't have a job at the end of it. Whereas in other industries, like if you're an accountant or if you're a banker, even if you're a postman, like there's always going to be, you can change, well, maybe not as a postman is a bad example, but you can change company within your same industry. So one company folds and you go and join another. And I suppose with rugby, that's fine for the top 15, 20% of players, because they'll always have a club because people will join it. But you always forget about the other 50 that are in a squad who potentially might not have a job at the end of this, and they'll be worried about the fact that they can't just skip over into a different industry. They'll think that all they can do is play sport. Now, some players will have done a good job in exploring options outside of rugby, and it's more about understanding that what you learn as a sportsman is very transferable, and you will be valuable to other in other industries. But there's going to be a period where you're not earning good money anymore and your boss is 10 years younger than you. And unfortunately, that is just the case. And you stick with it and you keep your head up and things just work out for themselves. Now, it's easy to say that, but it's not. It's a lot harder to sort of understand it and accept it unless you've been through that process before. And that's what we're worried about at the moment. You know, there's going to be a lot of worry. There's going to be a lot more stress on the confidential counselling service. You know, to be brutally honest, I mean, Hass sort of touched on it there. That it's as serious as there is attempted suicide. There is suicide attempts, you know, almost seasonally from Premiership players, and you wouldn't know that. It's obviously all confidential, and we're worried about this period. And the problem is the great work that the Restart and the RPA and rugby clubs have done around mental health and getting players to come forward and talk about their issues. That's amazing because that's a great solution, but that puts more stress on the service, and that extra attention isn't translating into fundraising. So we're in a position at Restart at the moment where we might only have another 3 or 4 months worth of support in us to be able to fund this service. So it's a bit of a crisis, to be honest, because there is no other support. Some clubs have their own support network, but for players in general, Restart's all they've got. Whether they know that or not is another thing, and that's where, you know, Hass can really help us getting that message out there, because it's not until you're directly affected that you really realise how good the work they do is. So hopefully we can find a solution. Hopefully we can band together as a group of players, probably, or as clubs, because that's effectively who the charity supports, and we can keep this afloat because it's pretty serious. It's vital, really.
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's stark, isn't it? Haskell, I think, why don't we try, when we're all allowed out and the lights go green again, why don't we do a live House of Rugby?
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. I just think, you know, Ed's point is as well that the fact that, you know, that anonymous hotline, the anonymous call line that you can reach out to, players can reach out to discuss things. You know, men in particular aren't great about talking about their feelings. They don't necessarily open up. You know, we were going to have Alex Reader on, you know, who essentially, you know, was in a pretty dark place with his injury and abusing morphine, etc. And he wasn't able to reach out and almost talk to his missus until the 11th hour, really. You know, these situations is that clubs, you know, the way clubs in this Premiership go on about things, right, and act in a certain way is so unprofessional. And I said it before in the show that for a professional sport, the activity that goes on off the field and around some of the structure, and you've seen it, you know, brought to the fore with this pay cut situation. Rugby had an opportunity about 2 weeks ago because this is the kind of people that played the sport could have come together and said, as a league, before cricket and football did, all players have agreed to a 25% discount and that to their salaries. And obviously, when the TV money, if it comes back in and there's an increase into it, we will review that. And players will be taken care of, and clubs and a uniform agree dealt with the RPA. Instead, we've got a situation where, you know, the PRL have gone, I've got nothing to do with it. The RFU haven't had anything to do with it. The RPA are playing catch up because clubs are going individually to players. You know, if you had a mental health issue, would you ring up and talk to your team manager or your club and confide with your club? No, the answer isn't. you wouldn't do that because they're just not a professional. They're not equipped. You've still got in rugby lots of old school mentality, which is, you tell a depressed person to cheer the fuck up. That's just get on with it. That's the mentality that sports people do. I've had to learn to be a lot more compassionate, a lot more kind of understanding of mental health issues and people I know and personal people, because our mentality of just soldiering on isn't the answer. So the reason the restart's so important and the RPA is so important is it gives players a barrier and it gives players an actual buffer. So when it's confidential, you're going straight to professionals. You're able to feed that information. If that's not funded, what are you going to do? Because dreadful things will happen. That is the reality of it. If people don't feel like they've got anywhere to go to, and I just think that rugby's missed a trick. And I think people who go around, people get upset with me talking about, the professionalism of the game, talk about the quality of the TV coverage, but actually, I get messages from current players the entire time telling me that what I'm saying is true and that I'm so glad that I'm saying it. And I just think we've got an opportunity with Restart, especially my passion with the RPA, to do things properly and finally make rugby the professional game it should be, not this Wild West situation with conversations in corners, threats, because it's just, you're playing with people's lives a lot of the time and livelihoods. And this situation could be such a shining light for positivity. But it at the moment, from what I've led to believe, clubs just telling people what they're going to do with no dialogue, no discussion. It's just not acceptable.
I completely agree. But the problem is, do you blame a coach for if a player comes to them and says, "Look, I'm struggling mentally, I'm feeling really down"? Do you blame a coach for leaving them out? Because you're in a sport, you're in a profession where you all have to be at 100% at full tilt. So if you do the right thing and go and speak to someone, we're in an industry where that will affect your profession. You will affect whether you play or not. You can't blame the coaches for that either, because you don't want someone who's not in the right headspace on a rugby pitch. A, it's dangerous, but B, it's going to affect the rest of the team. So they're not going to hold it against someone, but you can't talk to your coach because it's still that environment. And whether that's right, there's no right or wrong to that. I just think, unfortunately, that's just the case. So the confidentiality side of it is really important, especially in rugby, because you can't just go to HR and talk about it, because it's going to affect your career.
I had it firsthand myself. I did a lot of work with a sports psychologist from the age of kind of 17 to when I retired, and I used different people, but there was one consistent lady called Dr. Jill Owen I did stuff with all the time. And one of my approaches with England coaches a couple of times was because I wasn't being spoken to in the right way. And my thing was a confidence thing. I've talked about it a lot before. People think, I'm so far up my own arse that I couldn't possibly not have any confidence in myself. But I had a real self-confidence thing around my rugby and my ability. Standing out in front of people, not a problem. Chatting shit, not a problem. DJ, not a problem. But actually believing in myself, backing myself, not being so harsh on myself, not getting myself into a funk every time I made a mistake on the field, playing with inside myself. I tried to open up to coaches and said, listen, actually, I need a bit more. I need the old, instead of saying you're crap, go away and work on it. I was one of these players that said, listen, you've done this and this well. You haven't done this well. Here's how to go away and work on it. And I would work to the end of time to improve that. And I opened up to a couple of people about that. And I then suddenly felt a complete shift where they were like treating me as if I had a proper mental health issue. And, where they were terrified to say anything. And we once did a review once. We got this kind of team in where they were like, it was you had to sit at the front of the group, and they were like, start doing, keep doing, and stop doing, right? So I had to write what I thought I should stop doing, what I should start doing, what I should keep doing, and they would do it. And they were so terrified that I had such a bizarre view of myself that before they let me do the review, they took my answers away to make sure that they married up. Because instead of me being like, James Haskell, absolute hero, funny, legend, best rugby player in the world, everything else, they were terrified that these blokes were going to give me a reality check that I had no self-awareness about. Luckily, the sheets completely married up, and it was absolutely fine. But it was just, you've got to be so careful when people don't, because you don't get taught about mental health issues, you don't get taught how to do that. And I think what would be really interesting is just a bit more understanding, awareness about what it means, because you're right, it's only human nature to treat people differently, but there's different grades and different strands, and a bit more advice and a bit more help from Restart, or a bit more help to Restart, and we could be in a great place.
It's a very, very stark warning that you've issued. It's obviously the time is now. It's a good rallying cry. And I suppose from across the board, let's hope that the support is there for people who need it at this point in time. Very good to see the passion of both of you for this. We are very tight for time. So just before we finish, Ed, I'm going to ask you a really curious question, but I hope you won't mind if I do. Of all the shows we've done, this has been one of the most inspiring because of the story and the journey that you've been through and the recovery you've made. But I'm sort of picking up on the point you made earlier, which is in many ways, this has been the making of you. And therefore, if I was to say to you, you're back on that pool edge again 3 years ago, where you are now and the journey you've been on, what you've learned about yourself and the help that you have not only received, but also that you're now doing for others. It's a weird old question, but would you change anything?
So if I knew what I knew, if I knew what I know now, obviously I would go back and I could take that back with me. Obviously I wouldn't dive in the wrong end of the swimming pool, because having a spinal cord injury isn't all fun and games. You know, I still have serious bladder, bowel issues, sexual function stuff, temperature regulation issues that affect me day to day. But if I had to go back and be the person I was before, as well as being injury free, I'd take this. I'd take spinal cord injury and the way it's changed me mentally, for sure. And just, you know, like I said, being in a position now where I feel like I can add some real value to the world. It's not just Restart that I work with, you know. On the spinal cord injury front, I work with Wings for Life, and they put millions and millions of pounds into trying to find a cure for this. So I can do things hopefully to help raise money and allow them to do that work, because I now know loads of people with spinal cord injuries, and I've met some amazing people. But for some, that's the hope, the only hope they've got. People like Matt, you know, that they're accepted where they are, but they're waiting for a medical breakthrough, and actually it's not as far away as you might think. I think it's a difficult time for all charities at the moment, because obviously with us all on lockdown, the fundraising's not happening. They had their world runs due this summer, and obviously that's their biggest fundraising exercise. So as soon as this stops and we're allowed out, I'm going to do something called Walk the Spine, and I'm going to walk the length of the Pennine Way, which is 268 miles. For them to help hopefully fill some of the gap. But I'm going to also encourage as many people as possible to come and join in with me. So I hope you boys will be there for some of it. Obviously, I'm going to be walking for 2 weeks, so you don't have to do that. I know Haskell and ankle won't hold up for more than 10 minutes, but you can walk for as long or short as you like.
I'll moped along next year or something like that.
I'm going to be bloody supporting both of you, but which really is, the world is coming to an end, and that is incredible. Yeah, we absolutely would love to be a part of that, and we will certainly get it in the Facebook group, and we'll get our good friends and followers to get involved in that as well. Hoff, we're going to have to leave the bin juice for another time. This is the most eagerly.
I'm really glad, because I'm probably in there, aren't I?
You quite possibly are. We'll start our next show with it. Time has beaten us. Ed, brilliant. Thank you so much for your honesty, your inspiration, and the incredible work you're doing. Keep up the good work. Keep Haskell in check. None of us can. We will leave it there for this week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to House of Rugby. We're a YouTube show and a podcast. Don't forget you can dig into our entire back catalogue on podcast or on YouTube, and talk about your favourite shows in and amongst the Facebook group as well. Thank you to James. Keep good, keep well. Ed, you've been a superstar. Come and visit us again sometime soon. Keep up your good work. We'll see you again on Thursday. Actually, we've got a special show for you. We've got House of Rugby Shorts coming with a very old friend from South Africa. Until then, look after each other, stay safe, stay inside, and we'll speak to you soon.
You've been watching the House of Rugby on Joe, together with Guinness. Drink responsibly. Visit drinkaware.co.uk for the facts.